The great hall of Nexus Prime stretched out like a crystal cathedral, its walls made of some clear material that seemed to bend light itself. Hundreds of beings filled the massive space, each one different from the next. Some walked on legs, others floated in tanks of strange liquid, and a few just hovered in the air like living clouds of gas. Ambassador Marcus Rodriguez sat in the section marked for Earth representatives. Everyone called him Tank, though nobody remembered why anymore. He wore a simple black suit that had seen better days, and his tie hung a little loose around his thick neck. At 55, Tank looked like what he was, an old soldier who had been stuck behind a desk for too long. The other ambassadors around him whispered, and clicked and made whatever sounds their species used for nervous conversation. Tank just sat there, watching the show with the same expression he might wear while waiting for a bus. High Chancellor Vexthara stood at the center of the hall. She was tall, maybe 9 feet, with a body that looked like someone had crossed a praying mantis with a suit of armor. Her 4 arms moved as she spoke, and when she opened her mouth, rows of sharp teeth caught the light. Beings of the Galactic Empire. Her voice boomed through translation devices. Today we announce the return of an ancient tradition. Today we call for Beatel. The hall went quiet. Not the kind of quiet when someone asks for attention, but the kind that happens right before something terrible. Tank had read about Beatel in the classified files. It was old, older than most of the species in the room. Every 1,000 years, the Empire held a tournament. Species sent their best fighters. Winners got better planets, better trade deals, better everything. Losers got whatever was left if they were lucky enough to survive it all. The rules are simple, Vexthara continued. Each species sends 1 champion. They fight until only 1 remains. The winner's species leads the military hierarchy for the next millennium. The losers serve. Around the hall, creatures started making distressed noises. The Zephyrians, who looked like walking bird skeletons, began rattling their bone-like fingers against small stones. The quartzites, living rock formations that sang to communicate, sent out low, worried hums that made the floor vibrate. In their water tanks, the Deepsworn started blowing bubbles so fast it looked like their tanks were boiling. Tank pulled out a pack of cigarettes. The things were hard to find these days, especially the Earth-made ones. Most places in the galaxy had banned smoking centuries ago. He tapped one out and held it between his lips. Species will have 30 standard days to select and prepare their champions, Vexthara announced. The tournament will be held at Combat Station Omega-7. All species with military standing in the Empire must participate. She started calling out species names. When she said each one, their representative had to stand and formally accept the challenge. Most of them looked like they might throw up. If their species could throw up, the hegemony of Roth accepts, said a creature that looked like a walking tree made of metal. Aquatic Federation accepts, bubbled something from inside a water tank. The Crystalline Collective accepts, sang a living gemstone in harmonics that hurt Tank's ears. Tank found his lighter. It was old, a gift from his grandfather who had carried it in 3 different wars on Earth. The metal was worn smooth, and it still had his grandfather's initials scratched into one side. The Terran Federation, Vexthara called out. Every eye, sensor, and whatever other things these creatures used to see turned toward Tank. He could feel the weight of their attention like a physical thing pressing down on his shoulders. Tank flicked his lighter. The small flame caught the end of his cigarette, and he took a long, slow drag. The familiar taste of tobacco filled his lungs. He had been smoking for 40 years, since he was 15, and stupid enough to think it made him look cool. Now he just smoked because stopping seemed like more trouble than it was worth. He stood up slowly, his knees making small popping sounds that the sensitive alien hearing picked up and amplified. Tank looked around the hall at all the terrified faces and worried expressions. Then he shrugged. It was not a big shrug, not dramatic or meant to insult anyone. It was the kind of shrug a man gives when someone asks if he wants fries with his burger. Simple, casual, like the question did not matter much either way. Yeah, sure, Tank said around his cigarette. We accept, and the hall went dead silent. Even the background hum of the life support system seemed to pause. Tank took another drag from his cigarette and sat back down. The silence stretched on. Vexthara's 4 eyes blinked in sequence like she was trying to process what she had just seen. Other ambassadors turned to stare at Tank with expressions of shock, horror, and what might have been pity. A creature that looked like a walking jellyfish made a sound like a wet hiccup. Someone else started what sounded like nervous laughter, if nervous laughter was made by scraping metal against glass. Tank ignored them all. He had said what needed saying. Earth would send a fighter to their little tournament. Win or lose, humanity would do what it always did. Deal with whatever came next. The Terran Federation has accepted, Vexithera finally said, her voice carrying a note of something that might have been confusion. All species have now committed to participate in Beatel. She began explaining the rules in more detail. Fights would be one-on-one. No weapons except what each species could make and carry. The arena would change for each fight to test different abilities. Champions could be of any age or gender as long as they could fight. Tank finished his cigarette and dropped it on the floor. He crushed it under his boot, grinding the butt into the perfect crystal surface of the most important building in the galaxy. A few nearby ambassadors made shocked, gasping sounds. As the formal session ended and creatures began filing out of the hall, Tank stood and straightened his tie. A few ambassadors approached him, probably wanting to offer sympathy or advice, or maybe just to see if the human had completely lost his mind. Tank nodded politely to each of them but did not stop to chat. He had calls to make and messages to send. Earth needed to know that humanity was about to enter a fight for its survival, and they had 30 days to get ready. Walking through the halls of Nexus Prime, Tank passed windows that looked out into space. Somewhere out there, Earth was spinning around its yellow star, and most of the people on it had no idea that their entire future had just been decided by a bored old soldier and his cigarette. Tank smiled a little as he headed for the communication center. The galaxy thought it knew what humans were capable of. They thought Earth was just another small planet full of soft, weak creatures who had gotten lucky enough to discover space travel. They were about to learn just how wrong they could be. The news spread across the galaxy faster than light itself, on 1,000 different worlds in languages that had no words for what they had just witnessed. Beings told the same story. The humans had accepted Beatel with a shrug and a cigarette. On the entertainment networks, the story played on repeat. News anchors with scales, fur, shells, and stranger things tried to explain what they had seen. Most of them seemed to think it was funny. The primitive Terrans appear to have misunderstood the gravity of the situation, said a Zephyrian reporter, whose beak clicked with every word. Their representative showed no signs of distress or even basic comprehension of what Beatel means for losing species. The betting pools opened within hours. Bookmakers across known space started taking odds on how long humanity would last. Most bets focused on whether the human champion would surrender immediately or at least try to fight, before being destroyed. The numbers were not good for Earth. The best odds anyone could find were 10,000 to 1 against human. Survival past the first round. Most places would not even take bets on humanity winning the whole tournament. The risk was too small to bother with. Sports commentators pulled up old footage of Earth from surveillance drones and long-range sensors. They showed images of humans walking around their cities playing games, going about their daily lives with no natural armor, no claws, no visible weapons or psychic abilities. Look at them, laughed a quartzite analyst whose crystal body chimed with amusement. They are soft-bodied, short-lived, and completely helpless. They cannot even survive in their own planet's water without artificial help. How exactly do they plan to face champions who can tear apart starships with their bare hands? But while the galaxy laughed and placed their bets, something else was happening on Earth. Tank's message had been simple. Protocol 7 is active. You know what to do. In bunkers buried deep under mountains and facilities hidden beneath ocean floors, in secret installations that did not exist on any official map, humanity began to move. General Patricia Hayes stood in the main command center of NORAD, but not the NORAD that tourists could visit. This was the real one, built into the heart of Cheyenne Mountain with armor thick enough to survive planet-cracking weapons. Banks of monitors showed activity across Earth as Protocol 7 came online. Bring up the champion profiles, Hayes ordered. Her aide, Colonel Martinez, tapped commands into a holographic interface. Files appeared in the air, each one marked with classifications so secret that most world leaders had never heard of them. We have 17 active candidates, Martinez reported. All of them have been in the program for at least 10 years. Most longer, Hayes nodded. The Champion program had started in 1962, right after the Cuban Missile Crisis made it clear that Earth needed to be ready for threats from anywhere. When the first alien contact happened in 1985, the program had shifted focus. Instead of preparing for nuclear war, they prepared for something much worse. "Show me, Chen," Hayes said. The file expanded, filling the air with data. Sergeant Sarah Chen, age 32, born in San Francisco to parents who had immigrated from China. Special Forces training, advanced degrees in xenobiology and combat engineering, and psychological profiles that used words like unbreakable and adaptable beyond normal human limits. Chen's photo showed a woman of average height with short black hair and eyes that seemed to see everything at once. She looked normal, the kind of person you might pass on the street without a second glance. That was the point. "Where is she now?" Hayes asked. "Training facility Omega, sir. She's been there for 2 weeks, running combat simulations against every alien physiology we have data on." Hayes pulled up the surveillance feed from Omega. The facility existed in what used to be called Area 51, though the real work had moved much deeper underground decades ago. On the screen, Chen moved through a holographic environment that shifted around her like liquid reality. Her opponent was a simulated Gorthak warrior, one of the crystalline giants from the Titan worlds. The creature stood 12 feet tall and could punch holes through battleship armor. Chen looked like an ant trying to fight a mountain, but as Hayes watched, Chen did something that made her smile. Instead of trying to match the creature's strength, she targeted its joints with sonic weapons that exploited harmonic frequencies in crystal structures. The giant warrior fell apart like a building in an earthquake. "How many simulations has she run?" Hayes asked. 4,732, sir. She has won 96% of them." Hayes nodded. The 4% that Chen had lost were important too. Each defeat taught them something new about alien combat tactics, something that might save Earth's life when the real fighting started. Across Earth, other preparations were moving forward. In the Nevada desert, weapons that did not officially exist were being loaded onto ships that were not supposed to be able to leave the atmosphere. In laboratories under the Swiss Alps, scientists were putting finishing touches on armor that could stop plasma beams and deflect psychic attacks. The truth was, humanity had been getting ready for galactic contact since the first UFO sighting. When governments around the world realized that Earth was not alone in the universe, they had done what humans always did when faced with a bigger threat. They got organized, they got creative, and they got very, very serious about survival. While the galaxy watched old footage of humans playing soccer and walking their dogs, they missed the important details. They did not see the hidden military installations. They did not notice the advanced technology that had been reverse-engineered from crashed alien ships. They completely ignored the fact that any species tough enough to survive on a planet like Earth might be tougher than they looked. Earth was what galactic scientists called a Class 12 death world. The gravity was crushing, the atmosphere was poison to most species, and the radiation from the sun would kill a Zephyrian in minutes. The fact that humans thought of Earth as a nice place to live should have been a warning sign. But the galaxy was not looking for warning signs. They were too busy laughing at the primitive humans who had accepted a death sentence with a shrug. In her training facility, Chen finished another simulation and checked her scores. Tomorrow she would start live combat training against captured alien specimens. The day after that, she would begin learning to use weapons that could crack planets. She had 30 days to become the most dangerous fighter the galaxy had ever seen. For a human, that was more than enough time. Combat Station Omega-7 hung in space like a mechanical planet, its surface covered in docking bays, weapon arrays, and arena sections that could reshape themselves into any environment imaginable. Ships from across the galaxy brought spectators, media crews, and the champions who would fight for their species' survival. Tank stood at the observation deck of the Earth transport ship, watching the station grow larger as they approached. Behind him, Sarah Chen sat quietly in meditation pose, her breathing slow and controlled. She wore simple combat fatigues and looked like she might be heading to a training exercise rather than a fight that would determine humanity's fate. "You nervous?" Tank asked without turning around. "No, sir," Chen replied. "Excited, maybe. This is what we trained for." Tank smiled. He had chosen well. The opening ceremonies took place in the main arena, a space large enough to hold a small city. Billions of beings across the galaxy watched as each champion was introduced to the crowd. The noise was incredible, cheering, roaring, clicking, and sounds that had no name in any human language. First came Gorthak the Undying, champion of the Crystalline Collective. He stood 15 feet tall, his body made of living diamond that caught and reflected the arena lights like a walking prism. When he moved, the ground shook. When he raised his arms, the crowd went wild. Next was Hisara the Mindrender, representing the psychic serpents of Proxima Beta. She moved like liquid shadow, her scales shifting color to match her thoughts. The air around her seemed to bend and twist as her psychic powers leaked out in waves that made even the cameras malfunction. Champion after champion took the stage. Feltar the Acidic, whose touch could melt through starship hulls. Plasma Heart, a being of pure energy contained in a force field body. Each one was a legend, a creature capable of destroying armies single-handed. When they called Sarah Chen's name, the arena fell silent. She walked out onto the platform wearing standard Earth military fatigues. No armor, no visible weapons. She stood 5 feet 6 inches tall and weighed maybe 140 pounds. Next to the other champions, she looked like a child who had wandered into the wrong room. The silence turned into laughter. Not cruel laughter, but the kind that happens when something is so unexpected that people cannot help themselves. Even some of the other champions seemed amused. Chen stood at attention, her face calm and professional. She saluted the crowd with a crisp military gesture that most of them probably did not recognize. Then she took her place with the other fighters. "The tournament begins tomorrow," announced the arena's AI system in a voice that echoed through 1,000 speakers. "Champions will fight in random order until only one remains. May the strongest species guide the galaxy for the next millennium." The first fight was scheduled for the next morning. Sarah Chen versus Veltar the Acidic. In his private viewing box, Tank lit another cigarette and watched the alien media crews interviewing the champions. They spent a long time with Gorthak, asking about his combat experience and his plans for ruling the galaxy. They talked to Hisara about her psychic abilities and how she intended to break her opponents' minds. Nobody interviewed Chen. She was not considered worth the time. The arena reconfigured itself overnight, transforming into a maze of metallic corridors and chambers. It was designed to favor Veltar's hunting style, narrow spaces where his acidic slime could trap opponents and dissolve them slowly. Veltar was 12 feet long and looked like a giant slug, made of living acid. His species had conquered 47 star systems by literally eating their way through enemy ships. He left behind trails of corrosive slime that could burn through almost any material known to galactic science. The betting pools had stopped taking wagers on the fight. The outcome was too obvious to bother with. When the match began, Veltar immediately started secreting acid, turning the corridor floors into a deadly maze of corrosive pools. His strategy was simple: force the human into a dead end and dissolve her slowly while the galaxy watched. But Chen did not run. She did not even look worried. Instead, she pulled out a device that looked like a simple metal cylinder. She twisted one end and it started beeping softly. Then she threw it down one of the corridors and started jogging in the opposite direction. Veltar followed the sound, moving faster than something his size should have been able to move. His slime trail grew thicker as he got excited about catching his prey. He rounded a corner, expecting to find the human trapped and terrified. The phosphorus grenade went off like a miniature sun. Phosphorus burns at over 1,500 degrees and cannot be put out with water. It burns underwater in vacuum in any environment where there is oxygen to feed it. The chemical reaction produces its own oxygen, so it burns even where there should be no air at all. Veltar's acidic body, which could dissolve steel and ceramic, began to burn. The acid that made him deadly also made him incredibly flammable. He thrashed and writhed, but phosphorus sticks to whatever it touches and keeps burning until there is nothing left to burn. The fight lasted 47 seconds. Chen walked through the smoke and found Veltar's remains, a pile of crystallized acid residue and burned organic matter. She checked to make sure he was dead, then reported to the exit point. The arena was completely silent. 50 billion beings across the galaxy watched their screens in shock, trying to understand what they had just seen. The camera feeds replayed the explosion over and over, but the commentators had nothing to say. In the champion waiting area, the other fighters looked at Chen with new expressions. Gorthak's diamond eyes reflected her image like tiny mirrors. Hisara's scales had turned a deep purple color that meant confusion and uncertainty in her species. Chen sat down in an empty chair and pulled out a protein bar. She ate it slowly, while the arena crew cleaned up the remains of her opponent and prepared for the next fight. Tank stubbed out his cigarette and smiled. The galaxy was about to learn something important about humans. They were very good at killing things that needed to be killed. And the tournament was just getting started. The news networks worked overtime trying to explain what had happened. Experts from dozens of species analyzed the footage frame by frame, but nobody could understand how a simple human had defeated one of the galaxy's most feared warriors. It must have been luck, insisted a quartzite military analyst. No primitive species could have planned such a tactic. But as Chen advanced through the tournament, luck became harder to believe. Her second fight was against Hisara the Mindrender. The arena transformed into a psychological nightmare, a shifting maze of mirrors and shadows designed to amplify psychic attacks. Hisara could reach into an opponent's mind and drive them insane with their own fears and memories. The moment the fight began, Hisara struck with a psychic assault that should have left Chen drooling and helpless. But instead of screaming or collapsing, Chen pulled out what looked like a simple radio and turned it on. The device emitted a specific electromagnetic frequency that disrupted psychic energy patterns. It was based on research stolen from a crashed psychic serpent ship in 1987, refined over decades of secret testing. Hisara's mental attack scattered like smoke in a strong wind. While the psychic warrior tried to understand what was happening, Chen used tactics that no galactic military academy had ever taught. She moved through the mirror maze not by sight but by sound and smell, and the feeling of air currents on her skin. She had trained in Earth's deepest caves and darkest jungles, places where sight meant nothing and only other senses kept you alive. When she found Hisara, the serpent was writhing in confusion. Her psychic abilities turned against her by electromagnetic feedback. Chen finished the fight with a neural disruptor that shut down the creature's nervous system without killing her. Fight time, 3 minutes, 12 seconds. The galactic media went into overdrive. Military experts demanded to examine Earth's technology. How had a primitive species developed psychic countermeasures? How did they even know such things were possible? Research teams started pulling up everything they could find about Earth and humanity. What they discovered made them very uncomfortable. "Look at this," said Dr. Vexhol, a Zephyrian xenobiologist during a live broadcast. "Earth is classified as a Class 12 death world. The atmospheric pressure alone would crush most galactic species. The gravity is 3 times what we consider normal. The radiation levels from their sun would cause cellular breakdown in minutes. Surely they must live underground," suggested his co-host, a crystalline being whose voice chimed like broken glass. "No," Dr. Vexhol replied, his beak clicking nervously. "They live on the surface. They consider it pleasant. Look at these images. They actually go outside in direct sunlight for recreation." The footage showed humans at beaches, lying in radiation that would kill most aliens, apparently enjoying themselves. It showed children playing in gravity that would break the bones of a quartzite. It showed athletes running and jumping in conditions that most species would consider a death trap. "How is this possible?" asked the co-host. "Evolution," Dr. Vexhol said quietly. "Any species that could survive on a world like Earth would have to be incredibly resilient. We may have made a serious error in our assessment." But the galaxy was slow to accept new information. Even as Chen continued winning, most beings convinced themselves that Earth had just gotten lucky. Her third opponent was Crushbone, a warrior from the heavy gravity worlds. He stood 8 feet tall and was built like a living tank, with bones like steel and muscles that could bend starship hull plates. The arena became a simple fighting ring with standard gravity, Crushbone's preferred environment. The fight should have been over in seconds. Crushbone could literally tear opponents apart with his bare hands, but when he tried to grab Chen, she was not there anymore. Humans had evolved as persistence hunters on the African plains. They were not the fastest or strongest predators, but they could run down anything that lived by simply refusing to quit. Chen used this ancient heritage, moving constantly, striking at nerve points and pressure spots that human anatomists had mapped on dozens of alien species. Crushbone grew tired. Despite his massive strength, he had evolved on a world where quick bursts of power were more important than endurance. Chen had evolved on a world where giving up meant dying, and humans did not know how to give up. When Crushbone finally collapsed from exhaustion, Chen was barely breathing hard. Fight time. 47 minutes. 18 seconds. The betting pool started to shift. Chen was no longer considered an impossible long shot. A few brave gamblers began placing small bets on her survival. The odds were still terrible, but they were odds instead of jokes. In his viewing box, Tank lit another cigarette and watched the galaxy begin to worry. The alien media was asking new questions now. How had humanity developed such advanced weapons? Why had their surveillance of Earth missed so much? What else were the humans hiding? The answer was simple, though the galaxy was still too proud to see it. Humans were good at war because Earth had taught them to be. For millions of years, everything on their planet had been trying to kill them. The weather, the animals, the plants, even the bacteria. Species that survived on Earth learned to be tough, smart, and creative, because anything else meant extinction. When humans finally reached space and discovered they were not alone, they had done what came naturally. They prepared for war. While other species saw the galaxy as a place of wonder and exploration, humans saw it as a larger version of the African savanna, beautiful, dangerous, and full of things that wanted to eat them. Chen's fourth opponent was Plasma Heart, a being of pure energy that could burn through armor with a touch. The arena became a maze of energy conductors and insulators, designed to channel and focus energy attacks. This time, Chen wore a full environmental suit covered in hexagonal panels that looked like simple metal plates. But the panels were made from materials that did not officially exist. Metamaterials that could bend electromagnetic radiation around them, making energy attacks slide past like water off a duck's back. Plasma Heart fired bolt after bolt of superheated plasma at Chen, but the attack simply curved around her and dissipated harmlessly. Meanwhile, Chen used something that looked like a simple flashlight, but emitted a frequency of light that interfered with the quantum fields holding Plasma Heart's energy form together. The energy being began to destabilize, its coherent form breaking apart into random static. Within minutes, Plasma Heart was just scattered photons drifting through the arena. Fight time? 8 minutes, 3 seconds. Now the galaxy was truly frightened. Military commanders from a dozen species demanded emergency meetings. Intelligence services launched investigations into Earth's technology. Some species quietly began moving their battle fleets to defensive positions, but in the champion waiting area, only 3 fighters remained: Chen, Gorthak the Undying, and a psychic warrior named Mind Eater from the Void Realms. Chen sat in her chair, eating another protein bar and reviewing data on her tablet. She looked like a college student studying for finals, not a warrior who had just defeated 4 of the galaxy's most dangerous champions. The final fights were scheduled for the next day. The galaxy held its breath and wondered what other surprises the humans might have in store. Tank finished his cigarette and smiled. They had no idea what was coming. The semi-final fight came first: Chen versus Mind Eater from the Void Realms. Mind Eater was perhaps the most terrifying opponent in the tournament. His species existed partially outside normal spacetime, able to reach into other dimensions and pull out weapons, tools, or even pieces of reality itself. He could make gravity flow upward, turn light into solid matter, or simply erase parts of his opponent from existence. The arena configured itself into a pocket dimension, a space where the normal laws of physics were more like gentle suggestions. Reality bent and twisted around Mind Eater as he prepared to delete the human from the universe. But Chen had trained for this too. She activated a device that looked like a simple wristwatch but contained technology that most galactic scientists would have said was impossible. It created a localized field of stabilized space-time, a bubble of normal reality that expanded outward from her position. Mind Eater's dimensional attacks hit the field and simply stopped working. His reality-bending powers could not function in genuinely stable space. For the first time in his existence, he was trapped in a universe that followed consistent rules. Chen ended the fight with a weapon that was almost embarrassingly simple: a shotgun loaded with depleted uranium slugs. When you could not bend reality to avoid them, bullets worked just fine. Fight time, 93 seconds. Now only 2 champions remained: Sarah Chen and Gorthak the Undying. The final arena was designed to test every possible combat skill. It was a hellscape of lava flows, toxic gas clouds, crushing gravity, and electromagnetic storms. The environment would kill most galactic species in minutes. It was meant to favor Gorthak's crystalline physiology, which could survive almost any hostile condition. Gorthak had never been defeated. His species had ruled the galactic military hierarchy for 3,000 years. He stood 18 feet tall in the final arena, his diamond body reflecting the lava light like a living prism. When he moved, the ground cracked under his weight. "I do not understand how you have come this far, little human," he said, his voice like grinding stone. "But this ends now. I will make your death quick." Chen stood in her environmental suit, looking tiny against the crystalline giant. She had weapons, but nothing that seemed capable of harming a creature made of living diamond. The galaxy watched and waited for the inevitable end to humanity's surprising run. But Chen had studied Gorthak for weeks. She knew something that the galaxy had forgotten. Diamonds were very hard, but they were also brittle. They could survive crushing pressure, but they shattered under the right kind of stress. She started with sonic weapons, devices that generated specific frequencies designed to create harmonic resonance in crystal structures. Gorthak's body began to vibrate, tiny stress fractures appearing along his joints. When he adapted to the sonic attack by changing his internal frequency, Chen switched to thermal shock tactics. She used devices that generated extreme heat followed immediately by intense cold, causing the crystal matrix of his body to expand and contract rapidly. More cracks appeared. Gorthak was still dangerous, still deadly, but for the first time in his existence he was taking damage. "Impossible," he roared, swinging a massive fist at Chen. She dodged easily. Humans were much faster than crystalline giants, especially in high gravity. The final blow came from a weapon that most species would never have thought to use, a simple hammer and chisel, applied with precision to the stress points that Chen's attacks had created. Gorthak the Undying, champion of the crystalline collective, ruler of the galactic military hierarchy for 3 millennia, fell apart like a building demolition. His diamond body collapsed into a pile of expensive gravel. Fight time, 27 minutes, 41 seconds. The galaxy fell silent. 50 billion beings across known space stared at their screens in shock, unable to process what they had just witnessed. The human had won. Against impossible odds, using tactics that no one had ever seen before, Sarah Chen had defeated every champion in the tournament. In his viewing box, Tank took a long drag from his cigarette. The little cylinder of tobacco and paper had burned down almost to his fingers, but he did not seem to notice. He had been smoking the same cigarette since Gorthak entered the arena, too focused on the fight to take a proper drag. "Ladies, gentlemen, and beings of all classifications," announced the arena's AI system. "The winner of Beatel tournament is Sergeant Sarah Chen, representing the Terran Federation." The silence stretched on. Then slowly whispers began to spread through the crowd. The whispers became conversations, and the conversations became arguments. And the arguments became something that sounded like panic. High Chancellor Vexithara took the podium with an expression that suggested she had just swallowed something unpleasant. "By the ancient laws of Beatel, the Terran Federation now holds military supremacy in the Galactic Empire for the next 1,000 years. Tank finally dropped his cigarette and crushed it under his boot. The small action seemed to break the spell that had fallen over the station. Suddenly everyone was talking at once, shouting questions and demands and protests. Tank stood up and walked to the microphone system that connected to every ship and facility in the area. When he spoke, his voice carried across the galaxy. "Anyone else want to discuss humanity's place in this empire?" The talking stopped. Tank looked out at the sea of alien faces staring at him through screens and viewports. Fear, confusion, and something that might have been respect looked back at him. "For the record," he continued, "we never wanted to run your empire. We were perfectly happy staying on Earth, minding our own business. But you insisted on this tournament, so we played by your rules." He paused to light another cigarette. The galaxy waited. "Now we could do this the traditional way," Tank said, taking a slow drag. "We could demand tribute and submission and all that usual conqueror stuff. But like I said, we never wanted to run anything, so here's what's going to happen instead." He looked directly into the nearest camera and threw it at the billions of beings watching across space. "Everyone goes back to their normal business. Keep your governments, keep your territories, keep your trade agreements. The only thing that changes is this. If anyone decides to start trouble, And I mean real trouble, not the usual border disputes and trade wars. We'll send Chen to have a conversation with them. Tank gestured toward the arena, where Chen was calmly packing her equipment while standing next to the remains of Gorthak. She's good at conversations, Tank added. He took another drag from his cigarette and smiled. Oh, and one more thing. In case anyone's wondering if this was just luck or if maybe Chen was our only good fighter, Tank's smile got a little wider. Earth has about 200 more champions in reserve. Just in case anyone feels like testing our commitment to peaceful coexistence. The galaxy processed this information in stunned silence. Tank nodded politely to the cameras. Have a nice day, everyone. We'll be in touch. As the broadcast ended, ships began departing from Combat Station Omega-7. Representatives rushed back to their homeworlds to report the impossible news. Military commanders quietly canceled invasion plans and started drafting new defensive strategies. In the arena, Chen finished packing and walked over to where Tank was waiting. "How did I do, sir?" she asked. Tank looked at the pile of diamond fragments that had once been the galaxy's greatest warrior, then at the woman who had made it happen. "Not bad, Sergeant," he said. "Not bad at all." Together they walked toward the transport that would take them home to Earth, where most of humanity was still going about their daily lives, unaware that their species had just become the most feared military power in the galaxy. Tank lit one more cigarette for the road.